Hi everybody, my name's Tom and welcome to the first episode of a new series called Watercolour Bites. So these are designed to be quick little hits of digestible information to help you progress with your watercolour, and if you work with other mediums you should find it useful for those too. So we're going to start with some basic foundational stuff and build up from there, and although I will be diving into some theory, I will always try to wrap it up with what this actually means with practical application, so let's take a look.
Okay, so here we go with some basic terminology, plus a little bit of extra detail, and don't forget there's going to be loads more in-depth videos to come down the line. So we're going to kick off with colour, and basically any colour has three terms which can be used to describe it, or three traits, or three dimensions to it. And these three dimensions that we're going to look at are hue, tone, and chroma. So first up we're going to look at hue, and in very simple terms it's basically what colour is something. Although using the word colour is slightly misleading, because as we've seen, a colour is actually made up of hue, tone, and chroma. So more accurately we could say, where does it sit on the colour wheel? So for example, is it blue? Is it red? Is it orange? Is it turquoise? Is it a slightly bluey green or a slightly reddy purple? Or even a reddy orange with a touch of green, a hint of yellow, plus I dropped some white in there by mistake. We could say that essentially, whether it be an object or an area in your subject or the paint on your palette or on your painting, how would you describe its basic colour, or how would you describe its colour in basic terms? Not forgetting, of course, that in the real world there is no absolute colour of anything, and that any given colour and tone is dependent on what is next to and around it, and therefore it is relative. Well, yes, what he said, but let's keep it simple and say, in this case, that more accurately it is simply where the colour sits on the colour wheel. Next up we have tone, also known as value, and very simply this is how dark or light a colour is, or within our subject, how dark or light an area or an object is. So if we were to imagine the world represented in monotone, just black and white, and mixtures of those two things, so that would be greys, our tonal range would look something like this, running from black to white and dark to light, and that little section in the middle is what we would in simple terms call midtones. You may often see this grayscale split into sections, each given a numerical value. 9 is a common number, but there are plenty of others. You don't have to do this, and I currently don't do it that often, but it can be a really useful way to simplify and help understand tone. But ultimately, do whatever makes sense to you. Then last but not least, we have chroma. And chroma is essentially how saturated a colour is, or you could replace this with how intense or how pure a colour is. So as an example, let's take Pyrrole Red, a beautiful orange, vibrant and strong red. This is it straight out of the tube, highly saturated, very intense, pure, high chroma red. And then we can add water to it, we can add white to it, we can add grey and black to it, and we can add another hue to it. In this case I'm going to add green, which is the complementary, which greys it down, and all of these will desaturate or subdue the colour, lowering the chroma, or making it a lower chroma. And you can do this in varying amounts, which is essentially, as well as changing the chroma, changing the tone and the hue. We can also look at how different colours are at their highest chroma at different tones. So for example, phthalo blue is at its highest chroma at a fairly dark tone, ultramarine is at its most saturated highest chroma at a slightly lighter tone, magenta slightly lighter still, pyrrole red a much lighter tone when it's at its highest chroma, and then as always the yellows are at their highest chroma at the lighter tones, seen here with new gambos being ever so slightly darker than lemon, all at their purest highest chroma. One system that illustrates these three colour dimensions and their relationships brilliantly and fascinatingly is the Munsell colour wheel. Now this is all great, but what does it actually mean? So whilst we've looked at these terms in isolation, in reality they are intrinsically linked. Any given object, area or colour mix will have a hue, tonal value and a chroma. And simply being conscious of this and aware of their relationship is going to do nothing but good for your painting. And don't forget that this is a lifelong journey of learning, and that this knowledge is not absolute. we can't be expected to absorb it and assimilate it all straight away, but we can learn little bite-sized chunks and then we can apply it, and then as we apply it we learn more. But practically speaking, if we are trying to get from point A to point B and we're trying to achieve something in a painting from where we are to where we want to get to, we basically in watercolour have two options. We can either add more water, which will lighten or weaken the colour or lower its chroma, or number two, we can add more pigment, which may lighten or darken it depending on which pigment we use, and equally it may strengthen or weaken that colour. But essentially when we do either of these things, we are changing the tone, the hue and the chroma, and this we can call colour mixing. Now for me, when it comes to tone, that's kind of the overriding ruler of a painting. If we can get a painting that's working tonally, we can effectively make it whatever colour or hue we want. And then when it comes to actually analysing the hues that we're trying to create, we can simply use questions like, should it be a little bit more bluey, a little bit more orangey, or a little bit warmer or cooler? And then finally, when it comes to chroma, the question I quite often find myself asking, which is intrinsically linked to the tone and the hue, is do I need to or can I make this colour more intense, or does it need subduing? And of course, this all depends on what we are actually trying to achieve, or what is our artistic or our visual message in any given painting.
So that's it guys, I hope you enjoyed it, I hope you got something out of it. There's going to be loads more to come, so please do consider subscribing. A thumbs up really helps me out, and if you know anyone else who you think might enjoy this, please do feel free to share. You can find me on Instagram at TomShepherdArtist, and you can hop over to my Patreon page to see loads more in-depth tutorials of all sorts. All of the links are down below, and until the next video, happy creating, happy living, and I will see you then.